It's interesting how various speakers have brought forward this idea that we not only have changed, but we need to communicate to ourselves and to the rest of the world that we have changed. We are no longer a country of stuff, but a country of ideas. And Bruce Powe is an academic who chronicles those ideas with a verve that reminds me a little bit of rock and roll. Bruce, I guess you're what, a literary critic, a cultural critic. But he has an eye for and a taste for some of the more dramatic characters in Canadian public life. He likes the outlaw. Are you going to talk to us about the outlaw?
I'm going to talk about our country.
Great.
I'm going to sit down after those very passionate discussions and debates and calls for debate. I'm also going to use notes because I like notes. I'm also going to have some structure to what I want to say today, because what I'm going to propose is a new vision and dream for Canada. I am in entire agreement with the Right Honourable John Turner's remarks about the lack of debate in our political system. And being in a university, I can attest to the lack of the debate there, too. And what I want to talk about today, which will be my somewhat not so modest proposal, it will be the abolition of the monarchy and the establishment of a republic in Canada. I've been long interested in the idea that there is a vocation in being Canadian. And I've long been interested in the process of this dramatically unfinished country, our unfolding myth or story. I've also been interested, as Moses indicated, in media, but especially of late in the mysteries of the media, the initiations, the communion that occurs in some forms of communication, the cults that emerge, the transformations and energies through images, the effective image and how we read them, and how we are initiated into the processes and rituals which are often unconscious. These are, I think, linked back to the esoteric Eleusinian mysteries. The point of those mysteries was to connect us with the cosmos, to know that there is a spiritual cohesion, and to give us knowledge that we are not alone and that we are not lost. They are, or were, about liberty and about awakening ourselves. Which leads me to the Canadian theme and the abolition. I was in Paris in 1998 and again in 1999 with my good friend Derek de Kerkhoff, who I think is here. And we talked at that time to the French press, the media, and to members of the French government about Canada. And one of the proposals I put on the table is that Canada is a country which works out very well. In fact, it just doesn't add up in theory. The Paris press, who like a good intellectual tease, liked that remark very much. And in private, one of the young journalists from Le Monde said to me, in private, you see, the problem with France is it works very well in theory. It just doesn't work out in fact. And then the next question he put to me, which threw me because he knew my book, A Canada of Light, on the subject of my love for the country and its possibilities. And he said, why haven't you become a republic? What is preventing you from taking the next logical step in your political maturation and becoming a country that chooses from our own, on our own? We have a very vital constitutional culture which is known around the world. And we need a myth of liberty to go alongside our peace, order, and good government refrain in our Constitution. Some have said to me that changing the monarchy would be nothing more than symbolism. But I think there are vast ramifications. What would it affect in our self-image and our structures, class, race, law, language? We must remember that the symbolism of the monarchy is imported, not indigenous. And in an age of images which are often drained of meaning or ideas or significance because of repetition and overload, symbols can still have real impact. I cite the example of the recent passing of Pierre Elliott Trudeau and the very authentic, emotional response to the passing of one of our great leaders. And it came to me again as I observed these things, why it is important to choose from our own, on our own, and the establishment of some aspect of understanding that peace, order, and good government should also be adjoined with awareness and liberty. Now, there are 3 points I really want to make about that. First of all, is it possible? The second is, why is it necessary? And the third is, how does this fit into a really large historical cycle, which I believe it does? Recently, this question of whether it's possible or not, John Manley, our External Affairs Minister, and Brian Tobin, obviously involved in an imminent leadership race, though knowing Mr. Chrétien, he may never leave. Notice his initials, JC, his perpetual political resurrections. Mind you, Joe Clark has the same initials. Paul Martin has the appropriate initials, I suppose, for the heir apparent. But the leader of the opposition, or better known as Dead Man Talking, has... In other words, we're in for, I think, a time of debate, and I believe that that was what John Manley was intending with his remarks. Jeff Simpson, the Globe and Mail, in his Saturday, May 26 article, said that it's impossible. It can't be done because of the Constitution, because of the amending formula, which requires unanimous consent. He said it's with us, in the words of, I'm sure what was a quip of Mr. Trudeau's, it's with us for another 1,000 years. The Constitution has a restrictive nature, and for good reason. We don't want to go back to changing it all the time for every cause that comes along. It is deliberately restrictive so that we only go to change it when we think there is an imperative. However, the succession reference in the Supreme Court judgment of 1998, which set out the legal framework for separation, has a very interesting implication. I have to say, too, that I'm indebted to my colleague Lorraine Weinrib, who's a U of T professor, an expert on the Charter of Rights, and my very good friend Mary Eberts, who helped me think this one through. There is no way around the Constitution, but there is this. The succession reference says that the door is now open to the beginning of the process of constitutional reform through referendum. Now, while I'm not going to advocate that we should be rushing to do referenda on every issue, which I think is a formula for disaster, there are specific issues in which referenda, as Mr. Gibson was indicating, are essential and can be done at a provincial level. If enough provinces put this on the political agenda and say that there is a requirement to negotiate change, then there is a referendum with a clear question and a clear majority, then the political leaders must address this and make it a part of their agenda. In other words, what the the succession reference in the Supreme Court refers to is a move from representation to participation. The door is open. Extra constitutional public consensus is possible. 3 provinces can gather together and offer a referendum on this. A strong prime minister with a strong agenda can in turn take this to conferences, public debate, and forum, which can allow this idea to continue. In other words, we have a constitutional culture at our disposal which can allow the process to occur. Now, there's also an interesting oddity I noted when I was looking at the Constitution, which is that the clause which swears allegiance to the Queen, this is Section 41, paragraph A, which says it swears allegiance to the Queen, does not mention her heir or successors. Not to split hairs about this. It doesn't, in the current citizen's oath, we do not swear allegiance to the heirs or successors either. Interestingly enough, the British North American Act does cite the heirs and successors. So the door has been left open very subtly. The necessity? Why do this? Is it mere symbolism? Mr. Gibson listed some very powerful, passionate, and concerns for us all. There are great issues before us: the redistribution of wealth, the Aboriginal crisis in this country, fighting concentrations of power, justice in the transnational environment, who directs the wealth, and who will benefit. The lack of a viable opposition in Ottawa right now. Senate reform, or as someone referred to it recently, Jurassic Perk. The ossification and calcification of bureaucracies, not only in government but in universities, and something I could speak a great deal about. The question of merit and how one rises. I suggest to you that the elimination or the abolition of the monarchy and the creation of a republic is not just a symbolic activity. It declares that we are open to change, that the system is open to us, that another generation coming up can make a wager and a commitment and say, the ground beneath our feet is not fixed. It also proposes the question, who serves and what will we serve? The implications of a republic are certainly those of liberty, social mobility, merit, that work can be, hard work is honored. This is a rather novel notion. I teach, as some of you may know, at the Schulich School of Business at York, as well as other places, and some of the students are here today. And they're very hardworking students, among the best I've ever dealt with. And one of the things that they work with is this rather remarkable assumption that if they work very hard, they will get ahead. I agree with that, and I wish that were so. And in my less cynical moments, I've tried to encourage this. But the truth of the matter is there is a class structure in this country. It is very strongly coded. And that should, for us, become something that is less of an absolute. That the multiple worlds we know to exist imaginatively through art, and we've seen some wonderful examples over the last days of those multiple worlds, and factually or existentially through the complex, multi-ethnic and multi-linguistic world that we inhabit, should tell us that we are in the midst of a dynamic, open, possible field. Now, some people have said that our royalty is part of what distinguishes us, but we must remember, too, that Spain has a monarchy and the Danes have a monarchy, but these are indigenous ones. Ours is a kind of offshore parenting, as it were. They have occasional visits in which they come ashore and sometimes seem to be acting like yet another farewell tour by an aging 60s rock band. Necessary, but I think it is necessary because a debate and dialogue that would follow would allow us to think again about the political structures that we embody, uphold, and wish to advance. The abolition of the monarchy would also suggest that we are now looking for new symbols to reflect our ethnic and linguistic mix. Remove the monarchy, and you begin to remove the look of a class. An English monarchy no longer reflects the diverse languages of this country. Does it distinguish us? Is it something that still distinguishes us from the Americans? Well, I like to think that we have more than just that distinguishes us. I like to think of sometimes, I think it was Moses who said to me that Canada is Tibet to teeming India to the south. That is, that we are the contemplative observers, the ones who invent and observe what's going on. It's so interesting to see how Canadian comedians and actors survive as chameleons and observers and satirists within the American empire. I'm also moved to recall Bishop Berkeley's famous response to the scientific materialism of the 18th century. When he was asked what he thought of that, he said, well, we Irish think differently. In a sense, that is what our great motto is. We Canadians think differently, and we will continue to do so. The other point that I wanted to make with the historical cycles is this. Sri Aurobindo, the author of a very interesting book called The Human Cycle, talks about ages of chaos, ages of change, models of society altering. He refers in some ways to the incipient emerging model of globalization as an age of chaos. There are great technological changes which are electronic, genetic, atomic, aeronautic. He suggests we are moving not into an age of greater individualism, which he identifies with the 18th century and with industrialization and mechanization, but into an age of subjectivity. He makes that distinction. 18th century industrialization created, and early capitalism created the individual who was a commodity you could buy or sell people. The subjective phase of history returns meaning to ourselves and away from accepted forms, conventions, and traditions. What was it that monarchy once represented? It represented obligation, chivalry, courage, dignity, self-restraint, and historical coherence. These ideals look unreal when attached to that estimable institution. And ideas become decadent or mere shadows when attached only to cult and celebrity. Globalization is not only about the economy, it is also about thinking about political structures in a global way. Why is Canada a good place for this to occur, this process? I have argued, said many times, said it around the world in the places that I've spoken, that it is the least wounded and the least retarded of the great modern democracies. Like Australia, we are not founded by revolution, coup, civil war, or insurrection. We have always argued. Interestingly, when Gordon was talking about the Confederation debates in 1863, and yes, there were many things for which they must answer, but at the same time, in 1863 and 1864, while the Americans were slaughtering each other during the Civil War, we were debating over a conference table and in the evening dancing. And that is how the Canada came to be. Thomas Jefferson, who still so embodies so many of the great things about America, said that laws and institutions should go along with the evolution of our intelligence and the expansion of our awareness. The constitutional culture that we have is a generational wager. It can be done. There is necessity because it could help trigger the debate that was spoken of today about these larger issues, giving it a frame of reference and a symbolism that could in fact change the very nature of that debate. And it fits the world-human cycle to know the value of our souls with greater lucidity, intimacy, care, and concern. Let us remember the experimental nature of this country and our great contrariness to the styles, methods, and approaches of other countries. Let us ask, if we don't get a debate on this, then who fears the change and why? Let us also say, too, that globalization of thinking and of reach means we need new symbols, new words, new names, new phrases for the debate. For us, there is the need to add a myth of liberty, or better yet, a myth of awareness to our three-part phrase, peace, order, and good government, so that we can continue to bring forth the beauty of new worlds, the multiple visions that embody Canada. Royalty is an inappropriate geometry for our restlessness, for the struggling, questioning subjectivities that are the new modes of consciousness in our planetary affair. Thank you.